Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church here in South Bend, Indiana. I'm Daniel, this is Gary, and we are working through the book of 2 Chronicles at this point. And we're so close to the end.
We are.
And, but some of the time our readings have been like a chapter or a good chunk of the chapter.
Right.
For these last couple of weeks.
You're gonna stretch it out, right?
We're gonna stretch it out just a little bit.
So read less, so more in depth.
Yeah.
Nice.
Part of it though is that as we wind down the book of 2 Chronicles, you almost get whiplash as fast as the scene changes.
Right.
And if you read too much of it,
Yep.
it's just like it all blurs together. They're not long stories for the most part.
Right.
So it's little chunks here and there, and you're back and forth and back. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so let's narrow it down. Let's grab just a couple of them, maybe.
Yep.
As we wind down to the end of the book.
Yeah. It's kind of cool today because we do have a long section today too, which is nice. Because for like about the past 3 weeks, we've been reviewing king after king after king, right? And we've seen good kings, we've seen bad kings, and we've seen good kings that have gone bad.
Go bad,
too.
right?
Yeah. So, but you know, if I was being honest here, and maybe you're the same way, I'm not sure I could name many of them.
I can't name many.
Yeah.
At least not in order.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I could do. I know I can't do it in order, and I know I can't really do, put the stories with the people either, right? And I don't know if that's the worst thing, but what I do know is what we said from the beginning, that what we're going to see is a downward spiral.
Yeah.
Starting, we have David, we have Solomon, and we're way up here, with God. And since then, it's just been this downward spiral. Right. There certainly have been some good kings, and there's been a whole lot of bad kings too.
Yeah. And just a reminder that there were right at 20 kings in the northern kingdom and 20 in the southern.
Right.
All of them in the northern kingdom were evil. Not a single king in Israel, what we call in Israel, the northern kingdom, right? Followed God in any way.
Right.
Only 8 out of the 20 in the southern kingdom were described as good or following God, even a little bit. We're not talking like some of these guys were like really good. We're talking even a little bit good.
Yeah, because just thinking back, it was generally good king, bad king, good king, bad king. Not always,
right?
But maybe there was a couple bads in a row, but I don't remember 2 goods in a row.
Yeah, it was. And especially because Chronicles is sort of from God's perspective, the priestly perspective. It's highlighting. That's why Judah gets so much more time. We really Assyria. It's during this. It's a couple chapters ago that Assyria took out the northern kingdom. Yeah. So everything that we're reading here to the end is just the southern kingdom of Judah anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to bring that up, I think, next week.
Sorry?
No, that's absolutely fine, because I didn't realize it, and I don't know. So as you're reading through, we saw Israel, and Judah, and had to keep them straight. And then all of a sudden, when you read through Hezekiah, where's Israel? Yeah, but it didn't hit me till the next reading, and so I had to back up. When's the last time I saw that?
Yeah, it was under Hezekiah's dad, Ahaz. That Assyria was taken captive. Israel was taken captive by Assyria, and we'll see Assyria again, sort of harassing Judah, but they don't take them into captivity. So this was done maybe by the time we get to Hezekiah. A couple of decades probably have passed now since the 10 northern tribes have been in captivity.
Okay. Well, I want to back up too, because I think we need to go back and look at 2 things that God said when the temple was being dedicated.
All the way back under Solomon.
Yeah, so under Solomon. So if we go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14, God says, "If my people who belong to me humble themselves, pray, seek to please me, and repudiate their sinful practices, then I will respond from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land."
I'm sure you're going to make a serious point here, but I have to say the King James really does flow a little
bit better. Oh, okay.
The one that people hear all the time does seem to flow a little bit better than the net there. But I understand.
Yeah, no, but what was the first thing that was interesting was this showed up on my Facebook post this week.
I don't doubt it.
And as I'm reading it, I was like, this is really familiar, but I don't know why. And then I read the Second Chronicles. That's why, duh. So at least some people are saying, hey, we as American Christians have to do this, because if we humble ourselves, if we pray, if we seek, if we do everything that God said, then God will forgive our sins and heal our land.
Yeah.
But the problem is, he's not talking to us.
Right.
Right? I mean, this was made at the time the temple was being dedicated.
Right.
And God came in and said, all right, here's the deal. I agree to stay here. Here's my conditions, and here's what's going to happen. And if you do this, here's what I will do. And everybody's like, yay! Now, the closest I think that we can come today is part of the Abrahamic covenant. If we bless a nation, God will bless us.
Bless Israel.
Bless Israel. Yeah,
right.
God will bless our nation. So it's not like it's like it won't happen, but I think it's just the wrong verse.
Yeah, not that. And we will see that again over the next, especially several weeks coming up. If the National Day of Prayer is a big thing again this year, which some years it's bigger than others.
Right.
If that is a big thing, you'll see 2 Chronicles 7, 13 and 14 a lot.
Yeah. But here's another thing. So if, let's say you want to believe that's true and you believe that's true, well, now also 14 verses after that, you also got to believe this is true. Because here's the second thing that God said in 2 Chronicles 7, not the second thing, but the second thing I want to bring up about 14 verses later. So verses 19 and 20 out of the same chapter. But if you people ever turn away from me, and I got to stop because I love when God does that. So when God's with you, it's my people with me, and otherwise it's you people. Yeah. But if you ever turn away from me, fail to obey the regulations and rules I instructed you to keep, and decide to serve and worship other gods, then I will remove you from my land I've given you. I will abandon this temple I have consecrated with my presence, another indication that it's of a specific time.
Yep.
And I will make you an object of mockery and ridicule among all the nations.
Yep.
So I've never seen anybody promoting this verse
For America.
For America, yeah.
What's funny is that we love to take the blessings promised to Israel, and we say, well, you can keep the curses.
Right. Yeah, we ignore
you can have all the
it is
curses.
true.
We'll take all the
It
blessings.
is true. Yeah, we ignore that part, which is all part of, what is that, a hermeneutic?
Yeah.
Right? How are you going to
interpret
how
our
are you going to be
hermeneutic.
interpreted?
And it sort of sounds like, number one, it sounds like I brought you into this land, I can take you out.
Yeah.
Number one, right?
Right. And here's the conditions I will take you out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was the end of the, there were plagues and diseases and everything that happened first. The removal from the land was the last straw. One of the big things that caused the captivity was the idol worship. And we're going to see that with,
We've seen
with
it
some
all
of
the
these
time.
kings, and we'll see that
A
with
good king
Manasseh.
takes them down, a bad king puts them back. It's like the first thing that happens.
In Ezekiel, there's one particular prophecy, I think it's in chapter 10, where Ezekiel, in a vision, was transported to Jerusalem, and he saw the glory of God walk away from the temple.
Wow.
Like departing from the and it's just like, how crushing that would have had to have been.
Right.
To see it in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, that visual.
Yeah. So that's what sets. You're right. That's what sets up why these captivities are happening. Why Israel's gone already here in 2 Chronicles 30,
right?
And where these last 6 chapters are going to take us with Judah.
Yeah. So last week we read about a good king, Hezekiah, and he became a king at 25. He reigned for 29 years, and I liked it because it said his heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
Which I think is huge. And we continue with him for most of the week this week. And in the last chapter, we learn about his son, who has an interesting twist. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that happened, Judah celebrates Passover. And it seems like the first time in a while that they're celebrating Passover. Mm-hmm. And they intentionally invite Israel, Ephraim, and Manasseh.
Manasseh.
Manasseh, duh. Yeah. which is kind of interesting. So it does seem like this is the first time in a while, right? And they're inviting, quote, everybody to the party,
Yeah, so Assyria has already taken the northern
Right.
tribes captive, but
which is
there
a
are
good indication because I didn't pick up on that
yeah,
till later, and it was like, that's why you would ask the people to come.
but there's still some stragglers, right?
Right.
There were people who were not taken, and they were left behind. And so what Hezekiah is trying to do is build this unity within even the northern kingdom. You know, who's left. Now it's sort of interesting that Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim, those were the two sons of Joseph,
Right.
and so Manasseh's tribe had split. Half of them went into the land of Israel. The other half stayed on the east side of the Jordan with the tribes of Gad and Reuben. So it's possible by mentioning Ephraim, which is sometimes the whole northern section,
Right.
and Manasseh, it could be that he was doing an east and west thing, sort of a collective that way.
Yeah.
And later it mentions Dan and Beersheba. Well, Beersheba is all the way in the far south, and Dan is all the way in the far north. So it could be a way that these names are being mentioned specifically, a way to say he invited everybody east and west, north and south, the whole
Nice. Yep.
nation. If you are a Jew, you are invited to come to this thing.
Right. Which sure seems like it's the case. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it from Judah's point of view, these guys just got wiped out. We better take this God thing serious.
Yeah.
Because we're next. So,
Right.
all right, let's send out invitations. let's
Literally engraved.
go,
King
yeah.
Son- It mentions Asher, Zebulun, some of these other tribes,
Right.
which is a really big thing because there are some people who believe that the 10 tribes are lost. Maybe you've heard of the
Right.
10 lost tribes of Israel or something. They're not lost. They were taken to Assyria. Babylon took them over. And when Judah was taken in there, they were really all united. Some of these later prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, they refer to the whole house of Israel and Judah.
Right.
In the New Testament, we see all of them. So there's no such thing as 10
It's
lost
lost
tribes, like some people want to teach. Even in Hezekiah's day, he's listing off some tribes here.
Right.
So,
Right. So they do pass over, but they don't do it to the letter of the law. There's a couple different. There seems to be a timing issue that's off. They couldn't get it. If we're doing these invites, we should have sent the invites out months ago. Not everybody seemed to be ritually clean at the right time, but their heart was in the right place, and the Lord responded favorably.
I love that in verse 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can we make a doctrine out of this from the standpoint of, with Moses, God said, here's what you need to do with Passover.
Right.
You're going to do this.
Yeah.
And this is the way. And it wasn't done this way.
Yeah.
So is that,
I think.
what do we make out of that?
I think, because Hezekiah in verse 18 and 19, may the Lord who is good forgive everyone who has determined to follow God. We're doing the best that we can with the hand we're dealt, basically, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
and
exactly
the
what I
Lord
thought,
responded favorably. And I'm like, this is proof positive that even under the Old Testament, some people want to say,
Yep.
grace is only the New Testament. Even under the Old Testament law, it's always been about the heart.
Right.
It was never about. He told them to obey the letter of the law, but there were a lot of people who killed a lot of animals, sacrifices and everything, and they were right with the law, but they were never right with God.
Right.
They never had faith. And here we've got the exact opposite. Hezekiah is like, we can't sacrifice, we can't do all this stuff, but we want to worship you. Would it be okay, please, if we did it a month later?
Yeah.
And God is like, of course. This is what I've been looking for.
Yeah. Right. Right. So the nation started getting more right with God, right? It says, the nation tossed out things. So they tossed out their foreign gods. They were giving a tithe, and there was actually a surplus. Mm-hmm. Now think about that, right? The quote church had enough money. When does that ever happen?
Yeah. Well, I happen to think that now we're not under the Old Testament law. We've never been under the Mosaic law. The church is not bound to this. There's no command to tithe in the New Testament, right? At all. We give graciously. We give from our heart. We give generously. Whatever. But I really do think that in most cases, now there are some exceptions certainly, But I really think in most cases, if every family of a local church gave, let's say 10%, just to throw it out, right? It's not, we're not bound to that number. I think that most churches would have a surplus. They would be asking, what can we do with all of this money and resources, rather than we're short again this week. Can somebody?
Yeah. What do we not do?
Yeah.
I mean, they had enough that they had heaps, right? I don't know.
Piles,
They had piles of things that they were trying to figure out what to do with. And again, I think it was our heart's in the right place. What do we do?
Yeah.
And they kind of came up with a game plan. All right, let's the priests.
Yep.
Let's work our way down that list. And they kind of worked their way down lists and farmed everything out.
And they were able to use it to serve the people and serve God really well, and the people loved it.
Right.
And they kept giving because their heart was in the right
and that
place.
allowed them to restore all the temple duties too, right? It was just, we think about it in today's world of let's get the economy going again, right? And as soon as it's kind of self-perpetuating.
Right.
There's a little bit self-perpetuating.
Yeah. Once the temple was up and running again, and they were able to do their sacrifices, which made them joyful again, and they just...
Right.
Yep.
So everything's great, and Assyria attacks. Right. Assyria attacks Judah and was defeated by God.
Oh, I love that.
Which is an interesting thing, and I think that goes back to the first point we were talking about in the dedication. God says, "If you're with me, I'll be with you." The people were doing their best. God was acknowledging it, and He took care of the problem.
You know what didn't happen though is Hezekiah and the people didn't just sit back and say, "Well, God will take care of it.
Right.
It's all God's." They trained, they armed, they built the walls, they got the defenses up. They were ready to do their part, while at the same time saying, "God, we trust you to do what only you can do." And so God wiped out the army, the Assyrian army. They didn't have to fight at all, but they were
Except
ready.
for the king, right?
Well, the king went. Well, yeah, God wiped out everybody except for the king. He went. But Judah was ready to fight. They were trained to fight. They were equipped to fight. So it doesn't have to be an either or. God, it's all yours, or it's all on us. And I think there is a principle there for us as well, right? We need to be trained and equipped and ready to do our ministry, and then let God do what only God can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let God, but trust God to do what only God can do.
Yeah. So other nations at this point were bringing gifts back to Israel. I don't remember hearing about that from Solomon's time on, I think.
No, yeah.
Right?
No.
So
from that time he was respected by all the other nations.
Yeah.
I think,
it
Solomon
was a
was
respect
the last
that was
time.
coming back to Israel, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think there's a big difference that shows up between Kings and Chronicles, and we've been in Chronicles, talking about it that is from God's perspective, or like you said, the priestly perspective. But there's another book, or two books, called Kings, which is following more from a person.
Political.
Yeah, political. That
more of a
is
political
best way,
perspective.
human
perspective.
Better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And they match up, and there's some differences, and it's kind of interesting to look at the differences.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the differences seems to be in verse 32-31. Everything's going well. Hezekiah's got a bunch of money. Temple has a bunch of money, and a leader from Babylon shows up, and Hezekiah shows him the treasury. Doesn't seem like a bad idea.
I think
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
come over to my house. Let me log on, show you my bank account.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, who
Yeah,
does
you has a bigger army than me.
Yeah, right.
Right. So this seems to be maybe a reason why Babylon attacked later. Maybe not, but maybe not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
And in Kings, it made a much bigger deal out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really a passing note in Chronicles.
Yeah.
So the question is why?
Because I think the bigger story goes all the way back to verse 25, where Hezekiah was sick, he prayed, God healed him, and it seems like it should be a good thing. But verse 25, Hezekiah was ungrateful. He had a proud attitude, provoking God to be angry at him. I think that's the bigger story, is that the last 15 years of his life, or most of the last 15 years of his life, he wasn't following God like he had started well. Like you said, good king's gone bad.
Yeah.
Right. And it really was just a blip on the radar of God's perspective, showing the treasury, stupid idea, but a whole lot worse, his heart.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's my perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So there's a not a throwaway verse, but a verse in there that said, God left him alone to test him.
Yeah.
So what was the test?
Just to see,
Is he really going to show?
Yeah, is he really going to do this stupid stuff? I think the showing of the gold and showing of everything in the temple was, again,
Pride.
Yeah, the prideful. Look what I have. Look what I've built. Look what I've done. We're pretty awesome. You should probably leave us alone. And Babylon's like, yeah, you're pretty awesome. I think we're going to go ahead and take that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So what? So it wasn't. It was at the end of verse 31 in order to know his true motives, not just his actions, but what was in his heart. And
right.
I think showing the temple. I mean, this is the temple. This is the treasury of the temple. This isn't just the palace treasury. He opened up God's temple to the Babylonians.
Yeah, good point.
And said, see all of my stuff. And God said, hold on a second, that's my stuff.
I think, doesn't Kings kind of lead you to believe that he was buying safety for a couple of years?
Yeah. We see the bigger story in actually in the book of Isaiah rather than in Kings. There's that whole story actually unpacks a little bit more detail in Isaiah.
Okay.
I think if you're keeping track at home, maybe 36 through 39 Isaiah, chapters 36 through 39, maybe right in there.
Yeah. I missed that part. So.
No, they're keeping track.
Keeping...
They'll look it up.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me that I'm right or wrong.
Good. I didn't get that one on my to-do list. Okay, so now Hezekiah passes away. His son takes over. As we were talking beforehand, you had a really good point, because the son takes over at age 12.
Yeah, chapter 33, verse 1, Manasseh, right?
Yep.
12 years old when he became king.
Right.
Worst king, like in all of the kings combined, north, south.
Right.
And if you read verses 1 through 9, which this is like a horrible, horrible section.
Right.
But Hezekiah was healed from that terminal disease and he lived for 15 more years. Manasseh took over when he was 12.
Right.
Had God not healed Hezekiah, had he let him die, Manasseh never would have been born.
Right.
This whole section never would have had, we would have had a different king, a completely different trajectory for Judah.
So we assume that Hezekiah had more offspring.
Yeah.
Right. But this guy's 12.
I know.
So, where's all the rest of the kids?
That's
right?
It's a really good point.
Yeah.
Why did Manasseh get it?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of interesting too. We really haven't delved in it. A lot of times when they say, then this person became king. Sometimes it was the people. The wording makes it sound like, oh, there was a big story. There's a big backstory here that we're not getting into.
Yeah, and kings will fill in some of that. And
there's a fight,
and some of it doesn't. We don't know it all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a horrible section. This is just a really, really bad section. The stuff that Manasseh did, and he led, and then God, it's verse 10, the Lord confronted Manasseh, and they paid no attention.
Right. But this is also a little bit of a case of a bad king gone good.
It's true.
Right, which is the opposite of what we've seen. Because right after that, he's captured. Mm-hmm. He's taken to Babylon.
Yep.
Taken to Babylon. He cries out to God.
Yep.
And God saves him. And he comes back and
starts cleaning up his mess. Yeah.
Right.
Starts cleaning up his mess. Never. He doesn't do it completely, but he does start cleaning up his mess.
Right. So I was trying to think of an application for today. But if we take that and we look at our lives, what are we showing our kids? So you have Hezekiah who really did good till the end. Well, that's the only thing that this kid saw.
Yep.
Right? Was the struggle and the bad and maybe some of the good at the end. So, and he was also young when he went in too. But what do our children learn from us?
Yeah.
I mean, just because, and it can be good and bad, right? I mean, my kids have seen me struggle with things.
Sure.
And, it's the effort, it's the perseverance, it's other things, which are good. But it's really hard to fake a kid out forever.
Yeah.
Right. They see the motives, they see the struggle, they see they see what's going on.
Yeah, what's that legacy that we're passing down?
Right.
Manasseh never knew his grandfather Ahaz, who was a wicked king, what Hezekiah did, and he went the opposite direction.
Right.
It's sort of kids see something, and they choose one of two options. They either see it and say this is the way it always has been, the way it always will be, and follows that trajectory, or they say, man, I'm never going to be like that, and they change for good or bad.
Right.
And
right.
we don't get to pick which one of those they choose. So we have to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do and give them the best.
Right. So we can certainly have an influence on it.
Oh, yeah.
And we can certainly have a positive and a negative influence on it. And it's really for generations.
Yeah.
That it goes on, not just the next generation, although it's primarily that generation, but it can certainly be multiple generations too.
Yeah, it's really cool. And again, I've said this I don't know how many times. We're not under the Old Testament law. We're not bound to that, right? But God said that the sins of the fathers have consequences that can go forward multiple generations, and we know that. We've seen that.
Right.
But the blessings, when you have a good family, a good father, a good leader, those blessings can go for much longer than even the consequence sins can go. So
Very nice.
What we're doing here is not just setting up our generation or our kids or even our grandkids. We could be setting up 10 generations worth. As you read back through church history, there are many, many times where you see, like, I'm a 10th generation pastor. My dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and just a godly line of people who grew up in under the fear of the Lord.
Right. So let's change that just a little bit, because as we kind of close up for today, instead of certainly it has to apply to our family, but also our Christian family, because we're on Easter weekend here.
Yeah.
And so that brings into our job as Christians to go forth and make disciples, make other Christians, which means we need to be telling other people about the gospel message.
Right.
So there are children in Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And
which
we
means
certainly
we
do
need
generations.
to know it. We need to know it well enough that we can share it.
Yep.
Be ready to share it when somebody asks, like we see in 1 Peter, but also just in general sometimes.
And it can be scary.
Yeah.
We can screw it up, but we can also fix it.
That's right.
Too.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to be said.
Yeah.
Than have regrets later.
Yeah. Yeah. And Easter weekend is a great time that people, are more inclined to visit a church if they're asked, right? I'm not a big fan of, I don't want to share the gospel, we'll just bring them to church. I don't think that's the right attitude. Right. But Easter weekend is a pretty good weekend to bring somebody to church and hear the gospel.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Well, how about we end on that?
Okay. Sounds good. So that brings us to the end of this one, and we're about almost to the end of chapter 33. We have 2 weeks left in 2 Chronicles. We hope that you enjoyed this, hope that you found it helpful. We always hope you find it helpful. And as you're reading through, seeing some things, we'd love to hear what you see, what you find interesting, and share this on social media, and like it and share it and subscribe and all the things that we do. And we'll see you back next time as we 2 weeks left in 2 Chronicles as we finish this up.
Bye.